I was worried that we would be hearing a lot of wailing, high notes. Skrelting, exactly. As someone who watched his season of American Idol, like, I was there.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Off to Broadway, the podcast where we deep dive into anything and everything musical theater. I'm Tara.
I'm Stefania.
And in today's episode, we're talking about Cabaret. Which, like, if you're just looking at this playbill, you would never know what this actually is.
Well,
but this is specifically Cabaret at the Kit Kat Klub.
Cabaret, yes. Cabaret at the Kit Kat Klub. In the corner of the location, the Kit Kat Klub at the August Wilson Theater.
Yeah, these are the legacy bills.
Yes, from October.
Yeah. We've been teasing this episode for a few months now. We're finally diving into it. And it's kind of going to be a bit of like a cabaret chat in general because this is obviously like a different version than what most people are used to, but it's also the only version that I've ever seen. So I guess before we start, Steph, do you want to give a synopsis of Cabaret, like, as a whole?
Sure. I would like to give a synopsis of Cabaret as a whole. So essentially we start with, we start at the Kit Kat Klub and we're introduced to the Kit Kat Klub by the MC, and he kind of welcomes you in, and then you meet their star performer, Sally Bowles, and then your kind of eyes through the production are the character of Cliff Bradshaw. He comes from America and he goes to the Kit Kat Klub and he meets Sally Bowles. They kind of start a relationship.
Which is in Germany.
Yes, we're in Germany. We're getting there. All along the backdrop of, late 20s, kind of early 1930s Germany as Nazis rise to power. And you kind of have this outsider perspective of Cliff Bradshaw. And you're also looking at the house where Sally and Cliff live, where the proprietor of the house falls in love with a Jewish man, and kind of the repercussions of that as Nazism takes over Germany. What do we think?
Yeah, that's good. It's longer than I expected, honestly. I thought it was going to be shorter.
Shorter?
No, that's good. I do think it's interesting because, again, I have not seen the movie. I know it's been a long time since you've seen the movie, but I do think some things had changed from, like, movie to musical adaptation. I was reading today that, like...
the musical was first, and then the movie.
Yes, but then when it was revived... I don't know.
Well, the musical is always the musical, right? When it's revived, It's always the musical.
But I think the movie took, like, different liberties.
No, you know what? You're actually right on this. Like, Mine Air and Maybe This Time are from the movie and were added to the musical.
But the musical came out first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about this on a previous episode of them, like, updating, but I don't remember why. Also, before we actually get into this, I feel like we should
I Don't Care Much is also an addition.
Oh.
But it wasn't in the movie. If we're all interested here.
Yeah, we are date stamping this episode. We're recording early. It's January 11th. And the only reason we're date stamping this episode is because Adam Lambert and Ali Carvalho are currently in Cabaret on Broadway, but they are slated to end on March 29th. And it's possible that there's going to be an announcement of new cast or possibly a closing before or during the time when this episode comes out. So that's that. So I feel like this always happens. Like, we record something and then 3 days later there's an announcement. But Cabaret has announced its new casting of the MC and Sally on Broadway. And it is Orville Peck and Eva Noblezada. Thoughts?
I think this is really interesting casting. I think Eva Noblezada is pretty expected standard. She's a theater girly. I don't think she's so... out of the box. I don't think she's so different from, let's say, Ali, who we saw back in October. I do think the more interesting aspect of this new duo coming in is Orville Peck.
Did you know he's Canadian?
I did. He's, like, South African, Canadian. He's worked in London. He's done a little bit of West End stuff kind of before the persona of Orville Peck, came into existence. So he's kind of been all over. Yeah, he's probably most known as a country singer who wears a mask to perform at all times on red carpets all the time. So I think like one of the major questions is, what does that mean for costuming and the look in Cabaret? I don't know.
Yeah. There was an article that came out, I can't remember what publication posted it, but he did say that, like, this has been a dream role of his like, since he was a teenager, since he started, like, doing musical theater. As you said, like, he's kind of been doing this before he started doing country music, but, like, you cannot find a single video on the internet. It is completely...
There are a few pics of him. It's in Peter Pan Goes Wrong on the West End, if anyone's that interested. There are some pictures of him with his, I would say, like, legal name.
No,
but yeah, I haven't seen a video.
It's really interesting. One of my friends from work, I was telling you this, but, like, as soon as this was announced, he was like, I gotta go see Cabaret. And I was like, this is the person that is, like, making you go see Cabaret. So interesting. Wow. So I think it does bring, like, a different kind of audience for sure. With Eva, as you said, like, this doesn't feel out of, like, the realm for her, but, like, she is booked and blessed.
Oh, amazing.
She's good.
So great.
She's going to be great. So they start on March 31st for 16 weeks. But then we also need to talk about the other rumor that's been spiraling.
Who knows if this is real or not? And who knows where this even started? Well, I know where it started, I guess. But the rumor is that the next Sally Bowes, starting in July, is Miley Cyrus. Now... What? I just didn't know. I don't know if she's interested in theater. Like, I've not got that from her in any way. So this does seem like very left field for her. For me.
Yeah. Yes. It just makes me think of, like, all the star casting that they've done in the West End and how so many of those people were just like, oh, never thought that this was what you wanted to do either, but here we are. If this does happen, one, crazy. Those tickets will be so hard to get. And two, I think it would be for a very limited run. I do not see her doing this for, like, months.
It's like when Billy Ray Cyrus did Chicago for 8 performances, 1 week.
Yeah. So that was, like, who was the one that said it? Like, Miley Cyrus Brazil is the one that you were sending around. But it was Sweaty Oracle, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's where I saw it in the first place. Is he reputable?
Sometimes
yes, sometimes no. He's the first person I heard the Orville Peck rumor from, so sometimes yes, sometimes no.
So we'll see. But yeah, that's a new Cabaret casting for now, and if Miley Cyrus happens to go into it, then we'll see in the summer. But for now, back to the episode. But before we actually get into it, we didn't do what we normally do, which is, what is your relationship to Cabaret, if any?
So my relationship with Cabaret, I think my relationship with a lot of musicals kind of starts at the dance studio I grew up at, because the dance studio I went to until I was 12, the owners loved Bob Fosse, and Bob Fosse directed and choreographed the 1972 Cabaret movie, and so much of, like, the aesthetic of what we think of as Cabaret and is from that movie, and it's been so influential in so many things. And I remember there was some of the older girls did, like, a trio to Mein Air, and that was, like, one of the first things I ever remember hearing those songs. And so many, my experience with Cabaret for many years was listening to some of the songs because I've heard them at the dance studio or at dance competitions or just throughout, so much so that when we saw the musical on Broadway, without looking at the set list, I knew what song they were about to sing based on, like, the MC's intro, just, like, knowing, you know, Joel Grey's, like, little speech at the beginning so well. I saw the movie about 10 years ago. I think I watched it on a plane. And that was kind of my first experience with that. And then the first time I ever saw a stage production of Cabaret was this production in New York on Broadway. Mm-hmm. What about you, Tara? What was your experience with Cabaret?
I have zero experience with Cabaret. I've never seen the movie. I've never seen a production until we saw this in October. The only thing that I had known about it was I had heard, like, obviously a few songs here or there, but basically through, like, media of, like, you know, Schitt's Creek did a Cabaret moment. I watched Fosse Verdon when that came out a few years ago. It's always kind of been a show that's, like, in the conversation because I feel it's been so influential to, like, choreography in musicals, Bob Fosse in general. Just it's kind of like a show that is always going to be in the musical theater canon.
The, like, Sam Mendes production that started in London in the early 90s and then was on Broadway in the late 90s and remounted that exact same production in 2014 starring Alan Cumming does feel like very pervasive to the culture in general. A lot of people will know Alan Cumming like as the MC without even having seen it. Like, to me, I associate Alan Cumming with the MC over someone like Joel Grey, even though Joel Grey was almost not the original Alan Cumming, but did it in the musical, did it in the movie, did it in the next revival of the musical, like kind of owned the MC for many, many years, the way Alan Cumming kind of owned it for 20 plus years for modern times.
And now we see Alan Cumming as the host of The Traitors and like nothing else.
Yes,
it's
like
how things have changed.
How things have changed. To me, he is Josie and the Pussycats. Like, that is my Alan Cumming.
Or what's his name? Floop from Spy Kids.
Spy Kids. Yes, that's also Alan Cumming.
What an iconic man. But
I'm
yeah,
also a Good Wife fan, big Good Wife fan, and he was great in The Good Wife.
But yeah, I like really had no relationship to it, but had heard, we had been like following, I think I said this on a previous episode, we had kind of been following like the trajectory of the
this production.
2021
West End
production. That when those photos first came out, I was super interested. I knew the story like very loosely. I wasn't one of those people that like walks into the theater and then has a gasp moment when there's a big reveal at the end of Act 1. Like, I believe the woman in front of me did. But I do think that this is a show that will like constantly be on. It's been revived so many times in the West End, on Broadway. I don't think it's really like a tour show per se.
It does tour. I think a lot of regional
yes.
And like schools and stuff do cabaret.
There's a lot of characters in this show, so like it's a good chance for, you know, like a university to put on and like have a bunch of people just like do whatever they want to do. And I think this specific production, which I think if you're talking to someone that's like a super fan of cabaret, this is totally different than like anything that I'm sure has been staged before. What I thought was really interesting was I was reading on Reddit this morning, because there's obviously, like, as there is on any Reddit page, some super fans, but that like 1966 production on Broadway had a giant mirror where the audience could see themselves. And I think that's so interesting for obviously how the plot unfolds in this show. But yeah, I think it's cool that this is a storyline that is here, but every iteration could impact the audience in a different way based on how you stage it. So it's kind of like an interesting show to put on.
I was reading about the mirror as well, and I actually don't, like, I love the mirror because you are reflecting, you know, yourself back, but I think it is similarly achieved by doing the show in the round, which this production is, where the backdrop of the show is your other audience members, and you are the backdrop of the show for the people across from you. Like, it does really make you examine, you know, who it brings you into being a part of the show and a part of the world of the show. I have a little like timeline that I put together of kind of how this started. So 1939 novel Goodbye to Berlin, written by Christopher Isherwood. He was a writer. He moved to Berlin to write, and kind of the character of Cliff is based on him. And then there was a 1951 play called I Am a Camera that was adapted from Goodbye to Berlin, written by John Van Druten. And then in 1966 it premiered on Broadway. The music is written by Kander and Ebb, and it played at the Imperial Theater. Hal Prince actually acquired the rights to this, and he commissioned Kander and Ebb to write this. And at that time, he saw a parallel between, you know, what he called the spiritual bankruptcy of Germany in the 1920s, the lead up to World War II, and the struggle for civil rights in North America. He saw that parallel and wanted to, and kind of the like complicity of so many of the characters in this show with the complicity of, you know, people watching the civil rights struggle. You know, he staged that mirror to reflect the audience back towards themselves. The playwright was Joe Masteroff. So then that was adapted into a movie, 1972 movie Cabaret, and it was directed and choreographed by Bob Fosse. And I think that is, the choreography from the original Broadway production was done by Ron Field, not Bob Fosse. But I do think there are kind of two, not iconic, but two ways that Cabaret kind of integrated the culture. One is that Bob Fosse movie choreographed and directed by, and I think something like the movie Chicago takes so much from that that movie, just the way that the MC like introduces every song and the way that the songs are staged in the club and then there are scenes happening outside, blah, blah, blah. You know, he won Best Director at the Oscars. Do you know what they lost Best Picture to?
No.
A really good, well, I've never seen it, but a really good movie. They lost to The Godfather. It was 1972.
Wow. I mean, I think some people would say that that's a really good movie.
No, I'm sure they would, but people also say this is a really, I think it's like, wow, what a year. What a year. Then 1987, Broadway revival with a similar creative team to that original Broadway production, and it also brought Joel Grey back to Broadway as the MC. Then the 1998 Broadway revival, which is the one I think everyone is familiar with, even if you didn't see it. The Alan Cumming, Sam Mendes, they, brought the like little bistro tables for everyone. Mm-hmm. They turned the theater into a club, and that's kind of the production everyone was used to. I think it started at what we now know is the Stephen Sondheim, and then eventually moved to 54 Below, and then when it was remounted, it was back in 2014. It was just always at Studio 54.
Yeah.
Alan Cumming brought back again, and that time it had Michelle Williams, Emma Stone, and Sienna Miller kind of rotate through as Sally Bowles before it closed. And then this next Broadway revival 10 years later, 2021 in the West End, and then imported over to Broadway in 2024 this past season, starring Eddie Redmayne, and on Broadway, Gail Rankin. On the West End, it was Jessie Buckley. And what is unique about this is it's in the round. They turn it into a Kit Kat Klub, which I don't necessarily think is a unique concept, turning the theater into the Kit Kat Klub. But I don't always know if it's in the round. And I think what was really unique about this production is when they transformed the theater, but they also kind of created an immersive experience leading up to the show. So for, I don't know, an hour before the show, you can go in. There's dancers, there's a bar. I'm sure they're making so much at the bar.
Oh my God, the cocktails are like $25.
So expensive. Yeah. When you enter through a back alley to get, like, you're entering
with fake this garbage.
CD club in Berlin, fake garbage. And they take your phones, they cover your, no, they don't take your phones, they cover your phone cameras with stickers so you can't like film or anything in there. And the pre-show has all these dancers and choreography, and they just kind of created this club for you to experience. And we got a shot of cherry schnapps.
Which the shots are now gone, but I did want to say that the pre-show is a different company, in quotations, than it's like the pre-show is I'm sure the union rules are like kind of the same, but slightly, I don't know. If you watch Marty's vlogs, Broadway.com vlogs, they take you like kind of backstage where you see like the pre-show dancers, and then you see the actual actors. And the pre-show, as you said, I think those actors work for probably like 2 hours max before, like they kind of come on stage to end the pre-show before the main show cast comes out. But it is two separate casts for anybody that's wondering.
It would also be very long to have the same people do both.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine, I don't know, getting there. Our show was at 7:30? So you have to start at, let's say, like 6:30ish. So you have to get ready at, I don't know, 5:30.
Yeah.
So 5:30 to
maybe
like
even earlier
o'clock.
Because of the glitter routine, you know?
Yes. No, it would be really long. Kind of production. So I think it does make sense to have two different teams doing those.
Before we talk about like storyline and characters and actors and all that, I do want to talk about the immersiveness, because I feel like that's what a lot of people have been talking about just in general. And I don't know how you feel exactly about this, but for something that was kind of written up as of this like super, super immersive experience, I did not find it that immersive once we actually got into the theater, into our seats.
I 100% agree. Once you're sitting in your seat, the actors are performing on stage and you're in the audience. Okay. The people, if you're at the little tables, they have the phones. I think they were calling people during intermission.
I wish they were calling them during the main show. I wish there was
more. You don't want to distract people. But yeah, like if you were sitting at those little bistro tables, they had phones. You could call you. You could order food and drink to them. But that isn't necessarily the show. That's more of a money-making opportunity.
Yeah, totally.
To me, there's that moment at the top of Act 2 where they bring audience members on stage and put them in party hats and dance with them. But to me, there has to be more than, a gag with the audience, like one gag with the audience to call something immersive. Once you get on there, it's a fairly, to me, straightforwardly staged show.
I agree. And I do think that that's like maybe a slight downfall for this production, because I do think that, you know, like, why couldn't they have people in the aisles more often, not just down, like also in the mezzanines where we were, because that pre-show
Sally Bowles entered from our mezzanine, but then no one else came up to us ever again.
But that pre-show is so immersive with the actors just like walking everywhere throughout, that I think it is a slight letdown when you actually sit in your seats. I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but I was expecting a little bit more in terms of like, you are supposed to like be in the storyline, which brings back that like mirror kind of aspect that I don't know that I felt that worked to the best of maybe its ability. But I think that it wasn't as much of a problem on the West End, and we were talking about this just before we started recording, and I do think that's due to size. The August Wilson houses just over 1,200 people, whereas the Kit Kat Klub in the West End is like 550 people, so I do think like intimacy is a factor there. And I always think of like Circle in the Square, because we always think about Circle in the Square, of like how, I don't know, there's ways, this is like no actual comparison, but just seeing the way that they're doing Romeo and Juliet, that is now closed when this episode is out, there's more like interaction with audience in round versus
running around.
Versus this round.
They're in those aisles.
Yeah. So that's the only like kind of like, I don't think they should be calling it an immersive production, because I don't necessarily think that it is an immersive production.
Yeah, I agree. The marketing had been, to me, you know, immersive, over the top production. And then when I saw it, I'm like, oh, they're just on the stage. There's no set whatsoever. Yeah. Like, I don't know. And I you know, if you listen to our Sunset Boulevard, there's also no set. And I said, this does not feel minimal. This production of Cabaret, to me, does feel minimal.
I agree.
And that's
it's
fine.
Very different. Yeah.
That's fine for it to feel minimal, but that isn't what the marketing has been. That isn't what the advertising has been, to me anyway.
Yeah, like I do think that when you walk in, it's not minimal. I think that you expect
they've sold this like big, this big production.
But even when we were walking through, we saw the green light. You're following kind of the eye, which I think is a really smart thing to do. Then you're not even seeing, we didn't even see the lobby of the theater until we were walking out, which was crazy to me. But you know, like the entire theater is covered in this like gorgeous wallpaper. There's like a piano that's out in the middle. There's bars everywhere. I wish there was a bar like in the theater. I wish that I did like the fact that where we were sitting, the orchestra was by us, because that felt like I had something else to look at as well.
We were in what we would call the new mezzanine that they built where the stage typically is. Yeah. Because the August Wilson is typically a proscenium theater. And they took out a bunch of seats. They put the stage in the middle. The regular balcony is still there, or the regular mezzanine is still there, but they built kind of a new, I think it's 6 or 7 rows deep. It was close to me. Like, it
was a good
view. We were in the last row of it, about dead center. We paid, what did we end up paying? Like $66? $77
$66,
$20 off, something like that. For kind of dead center back row of that like new like west mezzanine. So that is where Sally Bowles enters from, and that you do kind of get you're fairly close to the orchestra. But yeah, and it does feel close, but again, it's not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Immersive.
All that to say, I do think this production is really good. For not seeing Cabaret ever and only seeing this production, I think they are doing some really innovative things. I also think, unfortunately, the story is very timely in 2021, 2022, 2023,
I think the thing is, it's always timely. I think that's the strength of Cabaret, is it's always timely.
It is, but I think specifically in the last couple years in the last year with the rise of anti-Semitism, it feels even more timely than maybe 5 years ago. I don't know, but I just think that like
not to interrupt, but like sure, but I also think there was always something happening in the world that people are standing by watching. Like I obviously, like, this takes place in Nazi Germany, and that's not to discount like the fact that like the main target was the Jewish people, but I think that when, you know, Hal Prince saw it and was like, oh, this is what's happening with civil rights movement, people are standing by and watching, and there's always going to be people standing by and watching for like their own convenience. I think that's just like an ongoing kind of fact of life, so I will never not be relevant.
Yeah. But I do think that the way that they, in this specific production, like, portray how, you know, these characters in the musical do, like, conform towards the end is very interesting. To not give away the ending right now, because I think we should kind of go through, like, the timeline of the show here. But yeah, like, there are moments in this musical, in this specific version, that I was like, oh, wow, that's a really cool staging moment. Oh, wow, like, I felt something based on, like, nothing that's going on, like, very minimal things happening on stage yet, like, I feel it. I also think it's interesting, I was reading on Reddit how, you know, when you get in there, when it's starting, everybody is, like, so lively, and the crowd is, like, cheering and clapping and everything, and by the end, it's like, should I clap after this song? It feels kind of wrong to clap after this song. So I do think that they achieve what they want of, like, uncomfortability by the end. Okay, let's talk about this production storyline. I'm like, where do we want to actually start here? I guess, like, kind of at the beginning of how, like, you know, the costuming in this production really changes from beginning to end. Act 1 is much longer than Act 2. Also, This was the first time, and then we saw it again in Sunset Boulevard, but, like, they put the run times in the bathroom, which, like, every show, could you do that going forward? Because I love that. It's really nice to see, like, the breakdown.
It should be there, and also in the playbill.
In the playbill.
It needs to be everywhere. Because if it's in the bathroom, like, I've already gone to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not...
But yes, that's true. Except we went at the top, so it was helpful for the top.
Yes. Because in here it only says there will be one 15-minute intermission. It does not give runtime of each act.
No.
Which I would like. I need that information.
But as we've said previously, we saw Adam Lambert as the MC and Ala E. Carvalho as Sally Bowles. We really enjoyed both of their performances. We'll talk more about them in a bit, but it's very interesting how this show starts at the top. If you've seen a photo, if you've seen a video, every MC kind of starts with that, like, blue-ish makeup, and they're not wearing... Are they wearing the party hat in the opening number?
They start with the party hat. They open with the party hat.
And there's, like, almost like a leather, like, corset that they wear, or, like, reddish. I don't know. Everyone's costumes are, like, not 1920s inspired to me at all. It's almost kind of trying to bring, like, cool, grungy, modern, in a similar way to Sunset Boulevard, but very different than Sunset Boulevard.
I gotta be honest, I don't quite get that costume. The opening MC costume. I don't get it.
I think it's just to show color, because by the end it's so not colorful.
Well, it's not that colorful. What is it? Burgundy and beige? Okay.
But the hair is, like, bright red.
Okay. I don't know. I don't get the costume.
I don't really know why. I just think it's almost like a elevated streetwear, which, again, I think we've said that on Sunset Boulevard episode. No, was like, that's what they're wearing.
Well, I did find, you know, Sunset Boulevard to be not even elevated, like, just regular streetwear. Whereas this, I was like, no one's wearing this. What is this? What's happening here?
Yeah. And then Sally comes out in that, like,
outfits, but
big fur coat and
like sunglasses.
Yeah. And then we get, you know, the opening number, which is when the audience is, like, waiting for everybody to, you know, give us that cabaret performance. We learn about all of the people that are part of the cabaret. Someone had said that on Reddit that they wish that all of the songs that aren't in the actual Kit Kat Klub are cut. And I was like, oh, but that's half your storyline, but okay. But I do think that, like, most people think that the most interesting part is taking place in the Kit Kat Klub. We did talk about this on a previous episode, but, you know, they have, like, a stage trick that no longer becomes a stage trick when they use it 10 times in the musical of, like, the round rising up and down with lights.
I've definitely gone back and forth on this because, you know, we saw Anne Juliet a couple days later, and which we've seen many times, and I think that show deploys their stage tricks so well in that they don't use them right away. They'll wait to, like, the most impactful moment, so when it happens, it's so special. Whereas Cabaret, like, right off the top, you know, the lights are coming up.
I think it's at the end of, like, Willkommen, right?
The first one, yeah, it's right.
Adam rises.
Exactly. It happens right in that first number. And so I've kind of gone back and forth on this because after watching the show, I was like, okay, the best things happened right at the beginning. But then it's like, okay, if we're talking about what they're trying to show in this show, like, not the best things happen right at the beginning, but, like, the most visually exciting things happen right at the beginning. you know, why aren't we saving that for the end? And I think as we like talk about Cabaret more, and this production of Cabaret specifically, you know, it starts with they're slowly showing, I guess, the shift in Berlin from this excitement and this vibrancy to this, you know, monochromatic and kind of horrible place in the lead up to World War II. So like I do get it, but it does take the impact out of it. So I understand from like a dramaturgical sense why you would use it off the top, but, and you know, they have another trick that they bring in later, but
I mean, I don't mind that it's used off the top. I just don't think it needed to be used every time the MC sang.
Your finale doesn't have to be the same finale. Like, the ending of every song, you're like, oh, he's going up on the lights again.
Whereas, like, you know, what's that scene when she's, like, unpacking her clothes and then everybody comes out of that giant suitcase?
Yeah, like, that's kind of the other trick I'm talking about. What is it called?
Is it Perfectly Marvelous? No. Is it in Mine Air? It might be in Mine Air.
Is it Two Ladies? Two Ladies. I don't remember.
Oh, it might be that. Is she not in it? Is it the MC that sings it? I don't know exactly what it is.
The MC sings Two Ladies. I don't remember which
one exactly it is. But there is that stage trick. But yeah, I do agree. Like, I understand what you're saying of, like, using it off the top because it's so bright. You know, all the costumes are so super bright. And then by the end, we're obviously, like, not bright at all. It's, like, very dark on stage, even though you're in the same room. So, like, that does make sense. But yeah, so like we kind of start at the beginning of the introduction of everybody, all the characters in the Kit Kat Club, and then we go through the motions of like, these are the people that we're focusing on, which is obviously Cliff and Sally. The MC, to me, is not that big of a role when you look at like how much I feel like Sally does on stage. There's like portions of the musical where I'm like, oh, where is he? Like, where did he go? We haven't seen him in a while.
I do think that different directors and different interpretations can use the MC in different ways to imply different things. I think, you know, what they do with the MC in this show is really interesting, but I think in other productions they've made really different choices with the MC, and I just think, yeah, like when you have a narrator character like that, it also reminds me of Pippin, let's say, where you've got this leading player and you're like, okay, you're guiding us through, but are you involved in this story? And as you kind of get through and through, you're like, oh, you are involved. Same with the leading player. It's like, oh, you actually do have something to do with this. And I do think it's up to directors to decide, okay, how much do I want to use you? How much do I want to integrate you into the story? Do I want, because, you know, he's never having a conversation with Sally Bowles. Like, he's kind of on a land of his own, the MC, doing his own thing. He says things
about her that she can then, like, react to, but they never... Well, he's really never talking to... He mostly talks to the audience and then his, like, players. So, like, the ladies and, like, the men. But that's it.
He's not chorus, if you will. Like, he's talking to...
He doesn't talk to Cliff. He doesn't talk to Ernst. He doesn't talk to... what's Bibi Newwood's character's name?
Fraulein Schneider.
Or Herr Schultz. He doesn't talk to, like, the main players, which is so interesting when, like, you are a main player as well. But yeah, I do... What I was thinking of earlier when you were talking about the movie and then the musical, like, kind of dipping in and out of being different, I read that in the movie, Fraulein Schneider is, like, an anti-Semitic woman. So then I'm like, well, how does she end up with Herr Schultz? Does she end up with him in the movie?
I don't recall. I mean, she doesn't end up with him in the musical.
She doesn't. She doesn't in the musical, but it feels less like she's more not like apathetic, anti-Semitic in the musical.
Yeah, she's like, she would have married him, and then as tensions are turning,
she like gets scared and backs out.
Then she backs out.
Yeah, which I feel like that's kind of an interesting change, if that was a full change from the movie to the musical adaptation, or like the movie to the remount musical adaptation. But that's why I think, like, when someone said that those scenes, like, we should cut the songs that are not in the Kit Kat Club, I'm like, but that's where we learn about those side characters that actually end up being, like, pretty important. So I don't know that we otherwise you're just getting, like, a drag performance if we cut all of the songs that are not at the Kit Kat Club.
Yeah, like, you're deciding, I guess, what you want this musical to be. Do you want all the songs to be diegetic, if you will, where everyone there is aware that we're doing a performance, or, like, non-diegetic where you're you are suspending disbelief, and it's like, oh, these characters are having a conversation, but to dramatize this moment, we are singing. And this is a musical that mixes both of those things.
I was going to say, it teeters on the line of doing both, which I think
you can do both in the same musical, for sure. Like, you are able to do both. Each song gets its own, or even each line can sometimes get their own classification. But yeah, something like, let's say, the Chicago movie, which, not to compare it to so often, like, all of those songs are, you understand, well, the characters don't really know, but they're doing a performance. You never have two characters doing, like, just a down-to-earth scene with each other and then singing to each other. Every time we're singing, we're in this, like, over-the-top world. And again, Cabaret, like, mixes both of those things, and you're in this over-the-top world, or in this, like, in the Kit Kat Club, you're performing, and then you're also kind of having these real moments between them, and the songs kind of are incorporated into both of those moments.
Well, the real moments also give us context to the story, whereas the Kit Kat Club doesn't do that as much. Sometimes it does. I'm thinking of, like, the bigger ensemble moments, like Tomorrow Belongs to Me. Like, that obviously gives us, like, some context, but in general, like, I'm not really getting storyline when we're over the top in the club. I'm getting that storyline when we're outside of the club listening to these other characters sing, speak, whatever.
Yeah, you almost lose the Kit Kat Club at the end of the show, which makes sense, again, because you're kind of moving closer and closer. Sally's been fired. You're moving closer and closer to Cliff is going to leave. Sally doesn't work there anymore. It's becoming a more dangerous place to live generally. So you kind of lose that over-the-topness and also the MC kind of transitions from this over-the-top flamboyant person in this specific production to someone who you see, like, slowly conforming to the expectations of Germany and Nazis in that time, which I do think is not a novelty of this production, but something that is different from what I think modern audiences of Cabaret are used to, as we're so influenced, I think, by the Sam Mendes interpretation of Cabaret.
Yeah. I mean, in this specific production, I'm sure people have seen photos, but it doesn't happen that quickly. It happens like throughout. I mean, there are, like, hints that things are breaking all the way through, just based on, like, the extreme makeup that the MC wears at specific moments, you know, like the cast taking off their makeup as the show goes on. But it isn't until those dolls come out, which I thought were, like, a very interesting way to do that. Something that I think is so great about this production, yes, we just said about that, like, stage trick being maybe overused, but the way that they do use the turntable element, specifically towards the end, I think is really beneficial and very powerful to the story. Watching a cast stand in a line just rotating on a turntable is a very eerie, very haunting way to end your musical, especially when everyone is in a gray suit with no makeup. Adam is now wearing, like, a blonde wig. Like, it's, and you see that image earlier when he brings out these, like, little doll versions of the way that he looks at the very end, kind of just, like, rotating around the stage. I think that's, like, really effective staging in this. Did we say that this is directed by Rebecca Frecknell?
We did not talk about Rebecca Frecknell. Yeah, this current Broadway revival and the previous West End revival starting in 2021, directed by Rebecca Frecknell. What else would we know her from?
A great question. She is the director, a multi-award-winning director who has directed in the UK, US, and Europe. Theater includes Julie, unfamiliar. She did A Streetcar Named Desire. Is that the
Paul Mescal?
Paul Mescal
one. Yeah.
Olivier Award-winning Best Revival for Cabaret in the West End. She's done Romeo and Juliet before. Not, like, too much here. Three Sisters.
I see, like, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I see.
Yeah. Summer and Smoke, which was also Olivier winning. But yeah, this is, I think, like, I mean, she won the Olivier for this. She did not win the Tony Award for this. The show actually did not do that well awards-wise in New York. But I do think, like, her vision, you can see her vision all the way through in this musical, which sometimes I feel like doesn't always happen. I feel like sometimes you see half the vision, but the execution is not always there. But I do think that we do execute it by the time we get to the end of this musical.
I do. The thing about Cabaret, and I think I saw a Louis Peitzman tweet where he said this, where he said, you know, any production of Cabaret, even if you don't like it, is still Cabaret, so it's still great. That's me paraphrasing, because the material is so strong and so powerful every time you see it. But I do appreciate that, because I think we're all so influenced and used to kind of that, again, the Sam Mendes version that I keep referencing, starring Alan Cumming, to come in with a different take and a different interpretation, and to stage it, not even just stage it differently, like placing the actors in different places, but to put them in, assign kind of a different motivation and meaning to what the characters are doing in a lot of this specific production, I think is a bold take. And, you know, we can like quibble, okay, do we like, is this the best direction? Is this the best direction? Whatever. But I do think, you know, coming at it from a different angle, which I do think this production has been come at from a different angle than kind of what we're used to. We haven't seen it before. But what I think the world is used to, or what is familiar with, I do think is like a really interesting POV from her. So I love that. I think, you know, are you familiar with how the ending is in that Sam Mendes version?
No.
So the big difference in that ending is the MC takes off his outfit and reveals his striped pajamas, and you know, is implied to be obviously in a concentration camp, and is Jewish, and is like facing the consequences of what is happening in the Holocaust. And so and again, a lot of people think that is the ending to Cabaret, but no, again, that is a Sam Mendes choice for that. Mm-hmm. And obviously this version is completely different in that it has the MC and all the other characters not being Jewish and in victims of the Holocaust, but being complicit, and not necessarily Nazis, but willing to look away from what the Nazis are doing for their own convenience. Yeah. So like, crazy that you can take this exact same show, exact same script, exact same songs, and kind of create, you know, a wildly different interpretation and staging to kind of imply different but also the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting to bring this up and also to talk about casting here specifically, because obviously Adam Lambert is a Jewish man, and he is, I believe, don't quote me, but I think he's the only one to do it thus far in this specific version of Cabaret. Obviously, Eddie Redmayne is not. I don't know the star casting of the UK, and there's only been 2 people on Broadway right now. But I immediately, when he was cast, was like, oh, this brings a different element, especially knowing like what the end of this, or the story of this musical is, not necessarily like the way that it's portrayed on stage, but his like real life Jewishness obviously is not a factor in the storyline of this musical. The MC is kind of this like, I don't know, almost like malleable character that you can like twist him and turn him into anybody that you want to be, which is why at the end, when he basically, like, for lack of a better term, like becomes like the head of the Nazis, because he is leading that entire cast, it's kind of like a little bit jarring seeing like Adam Lambert do that, knowing what his own history is. But I also think that that's really smart casting, because it just shows you that this character, as I just said, can be like turned into anything that you want them to be. So I don't know exactly how, I know we don't know because we didn't see it, how Eddie plays it, but just listening to that cast recording, it's very, very, very different to what...
They're so even just physically different. Like, they sound different, but they're even just physically different. Like, Adam is such a large man.
Huge.
Like, he's very tall and, like, imposing.
6 whatever, yeah.
And Eddie Redmayne is much more
the teeniest, tiniest.
Smaller. Like, he might be tall. I don't know how tall he is. But he just, like, is, like, a little more... Yes. Yeah. So I do wonder, you know, what that implies, or what that communicates to the audience in that version. Yeah. I think, like, you know...
yeah, that's so true. I feel like he's less, like, dictatory than Adam Lambert gives off, just because of his, like, his stance. Like, Adam is a big man. Eddie is not a big man. Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
Thinking about Adam, I don't know, is it I Don't Care Much, where he's in the gray suit, but he, like... he's carrying his wig, like he has like the wig cap on, he's carrying that blonde wig, like it's almost like before he puts on like the final mask of, or before he commits completely to what is expected or what is necessary, what he views as necessary for his own survival in that moment at the expense of others. Like that uniform, that disguise, to use kind of the transition of costumes, and to see kind of the dressing or the undressing adds really to like the character's motivations or choices. I think it's a very interesting production. I know it's gotten like lots of mixed feelings on it. I tried to pull up some reviews from New York because I think it was pretty widely loved in the West End, and it
won a lot of Oliviers in the West End.
And also, like, it's still running there. It's almost 4 years later, and I just think it was received very well there. So let me read some headlines here. I pulled up the Playbill kind of review summary. So here's from Variety. Cabaret review. Eddie Redmayne and Gail Rankin lead high-style revival that cuts to the bone. Okay.
That sounds pretty positive to me.
That's pretty positive. Okay. New York Theater Guide. Cabaret review. Willkommen to a Kit Kat Klub like no other. Okay, that's pretty nothing. This is Daily Beast. Eddie Redmayne excels as the MC in a boozy Broadway cabaret. Here's the subtitle. Eddie Redmayne makes for a... Okay, that's so rude. They just...
Did you get geo-blocked?
They just paywalled me.
Oh.
I was about to read the subtitle. Okay. And here's Theater Mania. Review. Cabaret returns to Broadway in an incoherent revival. So, again, very mixed, I think, of the Broadway rendition in a way that it wasn't received that way, I don't think, on the West End.
Yes, but also it's interesting because with this new cast, it kind of found a new life. A lot of people are enjoying like this current cast of Cabaret, and I mean, we've talked about this on previous episodes, but like Adam Lambert is giving a stunning performance in this musical, and I think that people, including you, discredited that he might be I mean, not to the fact that like he's not talented, because we obviously know that he's very talented.
He's a wonderful singer.
But if you listen to what Eddie is doing on the cast recording, and if you imagine Adam Lambert doing kind of an impression of that, you'd be like, oh my God, no, like this will not work. So to see that he's doing kind of the complete opposite is like really, like, I think his ending is so haunting to me that I don't know that I would feel the same way seeing what I hear Eddie do on this cast recording.
I think the big difference is when you listen to Eddie on the cast recording, you feel that he's pushing his voice to its absolute limits.
It is unhinged.
No, it's crazy. It's kooky.
Wish I saw it, but like unhinged.
He's really pushing his voice as far as it can go. And Adam's voice can obviously go a lot farther than Eddie's voice can go. And so I was worried that we would be hearing a lot of wailing, high notes. Skrelting, exactly. As someone who watched his season of American Idol, like I was there. But what he showed in this production was so much restraint. I was surprised. Maybe I shouldn't have discredited him, but I hadn't seen him do theater before. He hasn't done theater in a really long time. I know theater is his roots.
Last time he did it was like the national tour of Wicked. He was Fiyero, but that was a million years ago.
Pre-American Idol. I hope he does more theater after this, because I think this is his really
Broadway
talented.
debut.
This is Broadway debut. Yeah, theater is his roots, but he hasn't really had the opportunity, or he's been focused on other things since kind of American Idol.
He's just been a little busy touring with Queen.
He's been a busy guy, and so to see him really, I feel, understand the character and understand what choices the character needed from him to make with his voice, because he has such like a powerful tool. It's very malleable, and he chose, for the most part, it's like very restrained. And I think the most you hear him really sing is I Don't Care Much near the end, which the first night that he performed, like I heard a bootleg of that on Twitter, and now they've released an official version of it where he sounds like amazing. But once I heard that kind of unofficial bootleg, I was like, oh, I think he's gonna do really well in this. I think he has kind of, he knows what this character needs and what it needs from him, and it doesn't need everything from him. It needs certain parts of his talent.
Yeah, I was listening to, before we came on here, Mickey Joe Theater talk about Adam Lambert specifically, and he said he's seen this production like 10 times between Broadway and the West End, and by far Adam Lambert is vocally the best MC that's been cast. And I believe that because we are star casting this show. So vocally 100%, like he has shown time and time that he has the chops, but agree that like it's very subtle. Again, I like can't help but compare it to like the actual cast recording that we have of this specific revival, where like Eddie is so over the top in every sense of the word, and Adam.
And I think that's what the reviews were saying too. I think that's what the reviews were saying. I wonder if it's also because he's a smaller guy.
He feels
so you have to do more, whereas Adam is, you know, a larger like man, like, and you know, goes a bit more internal with choices, or a bit more restrained with choices. He has so much, so he takes it down for higher impact.
I would be curious to know if he started on Broadway, what award season might have looked like, because again, so many people have said that like he has like breathed new life into this version of the MC. We also need to talk about...
I think Groff was safe, though. I think
100%. But I do think Cabaret might have been a little more in the conversation as a whole.
Sure.
Because people seem to like it much more than... It's funny, like, people were paying, like, astronomical prices to see it the first time, then the prices started to drop, and everyone was
prices
like,
are so much less right now.
This show is good. Like, I really like this show.
I would recommend, especially because the prices are a bit more reasonable now.
Yeah. We can't talk about, like, him without talking about, you know, Ala E. Carvalho as Sally Bowles. I also really loved her performance. But again, listening to the cast recording, like, nobody can do what Jessie Buckley is doing on that cast recording.
I'm such a
like,
fan
her cabaret is so... I can almost like visualize her like putting her entire body into the way that she's singing. There are certain people that when you listen to something, you can see them just like giving everything, leaving everything on the stage. And that's not to say that like Ali E is not doing that. I think she is really, really strong. Another amazing, I think, Broadway debut for her. She's very young. So debut. To play this as such a young woman as well and give it so much power, like I believe her all the way through. I really like you feel for Sally like all the way through. The way that she's talking to Cliff, I feel like she had really great chemistry with him, who was played by Calvin Leon Smith. They were really great together. Him. Yeah, he was really good. I thought her relationship with BB Newirth was really good, and then just the way that she like interacts with the like cabaret, like the Kit Kat Klub ensemble. Like I really believed her Sally all the way through. And it's interesting because when you do have a production like this and you have kind of set that mandate of the West End of like star casting, you never know what you can get with these people that are playing these roles. So to see someone who is like a Disney princess kind of completely strip that and turn that completely upside down in this character, it's like really exciting to see someone be able to do what she's doing in this production of Cabaret.
Yeah, I think she's wonderful in this, and it is definitely like a more mature role than she's ever done before. Remember Rise? Remember her on Rise?
Who could forget?
You know, she came into our consciousness as Moana, and now is, you know, Moana 2. But yeah, I do think I'm excited for her doing this, and I hope she also does theater again, because I think her voice and her talent are so good, and I really liked her interpretation of Sally. She felt very natural to me. Again, I liked her a lot.
What a great British accent.
I know, it was a good British accent. I thought. Yeah, like when she introduces herself and she just screams like, what is it, hello darlings or hello chickens?
Something
I don't
like
know
that, yeah.
What she screams, and she like runs across in her amazing outfits the whole time. But yeah, I really felt like so naturalistic from her. And then of course when you get to something like Maybe This Time, and you get to hear the full power of her vocals, that's so exciting for me to get to hear her sing that.
Yeah, so natural. Like, I felt everybody's performances in this entire company is like, we're talking about a very over-the-top, like, kind of experience here, but everybody giving, like, a really, like, realistic performance, which I feel like could potentially get lost in a version of Cabaret that's this kind of, like, I don't know, starts so over the top, ends so muted. You could kind of like get lost in that, but I feel like these people give really realistic performances. And again, as you said, like Calvin Leon Smith playing Cliff, like that was the most realistic performance I saw on the stage. Like I believed every word that man said throughout the entire production.
I liked him a lot. I liked Cliff a lot. Something that we were talking about, as we left was, is Cliff typically played by a black man? And the answer is no, obviously not. But in this production, he is played by a black man. And it's not fully formed, but what does that add to the context of this story? Ernst is befriending him to try and have him help his cause, and sees him as an ally or someone who would listen to his message or what he's thinking or what his goals, let's say. And I do wonder what the choice to have Cliff be a black man and have Ernst see a friend in him means in this production, and like why they made that choice. I don't know if I have a fully formed thought on that, but I do think it's an interesting choice here.
I agree with you. I think it's something that not enough people are talking about in this production. To me, it's less about the relationship that he has with Ernst and more about the relationship that he has with Herr Schultz, because to me, it's like we are both in the like minority of like all of these German people, and I see you because you see me. And I specifically think of that scene when he leaves, or Herr Schultz says that he has to leave because he cannot stay in Germany any longer. And then they have this like beautiful moment, which like this moment immediately made me tear up when he earlier in the production, Herr Schultz says to Cliff, "I wish you muzzle," which is like he hopes that, good luck, whatever. And then it's completely flipped when Herr Schultz has to flee Germany and Cliff says it back to him. I was like, oh, they are teammates now. Like these are the two people that have this connection because they don't fit in with the rest of the cast of like of the German people that are now under like, what's his name, Ernst. So I don't necessarily see it as like Ernst trying to bring him in. I more see it as like this is the relationship between like these characters that don't quite fit into what everybody else is conforming to. But it is interesting because like he does try to befriend him like right off the top.
Yeah.
So I don't really know either.
I think there is something to, talking about how Prince saw this story and was reminded of what was happening in North America with the civil rights movement. And I think, having Cliff be a character who, is living in America, living under racism and kind of recognizing what is happening in Berlin at that time. I don't know, maybe. We can, something that I see oftentimes is that Black people are often at the forefront of social justice and like fighting for other minority groups because it is something that they like recognize and see what has happened to them over time, and they have not had the privilege to be able to turn a blind eye and do what is convenient for them. But yeah, it did bring me not pause, but it did make me wonder, because obviously we know the Holocaust primarily targeted Jewish people, but also targeted, many other minorities, including Black people, including disabilities, including so many other people. And that part is just like kind of like we're suspending that for this production almost. Or maybe his Americanness protects him. I don't know. And maybe there's a deep dive somewhere that we can find or someone can send our way as to why the choice to make Cliff Black in this production was made.
I also think it's interesting because, again, with the start casting, hasn't happened in New York because, again, there's only been 2 people, but there has been a Black MC in the West End. And I'd be curious to know how that is played with Cliff, because I think we're under the impression that Cliff is cast as a Black man in both of these productions. I don't actually know the answer to that, but at least on Broadway, on Broadway
it's been 2 Black men as the main casting.
But if it is that way in the West End, I would be curious to know what it's like when the MC is also like a minority, because we haven't seen that.
And maybe we're delving too deep into it. Maybe they just cast an actor that they liked.
It seems too intentional for that, though.
I know.
Yeah, it feels very intentional to me because, yeah, like obviously the ensemble is any race, any whatever, because they're kind of, again, these like people that you can transform into anything that you want. They're not actually like real characters in the same way that like Cliff is a real man who's writing the story, who then tells the story at the end of the show.
But when it is a show that is about race, like I do think it has to be, every casting does have to be considered in that way. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they didn't think about it like as much as we're thinking about it right now, but it is the first thing that we said when we left the theater, so I have to imagine that somebody in the room was like, hey, people are going to talk about this. Okay, I did want to talk about one of my favorite moments in this production, which is in Tomorrow Belongs to Me, which is kind of when that reveal happens in this specific...
At the end of Act 1?
Yes. In this specific production, and I don't know exactly how it happens in other productions, but like Ernst takes off his jacket to reveal his like armband that he's wearing in support of the Nazis, and people do gasp. Like that does happen in the theater. If you do not know, like that is a big reveal moment, that like this guy that's like very charming all the way up until that moment is actually kind of like on the other side, and we're not supposed to trust him. But that's also the scene when Herr Schultz and Fraulein Schneider, it's like their engagement party, almost their wedding.
It is their engagement. Yes. It is their engagement party.
Right. So it's like a big party scene. It's this German woman who's about to marry this Jewish man, and then in walks this like Nazi, basically. So like it's a big reveal moment. But for me, which I was like not expecting at all, and I thought it was so brilliantly done, so like hats off to whoever made this staging choice, or maybe it was a combination of people, but there's a moment when everybody is dancing and they kind of mock, which is like tradition in Jewish weddings, of stepping on the glass. The MC does that, but when he does that, big like almost confetti pieces that look like glass shoot out at the theater, which is supposed to, I believe, resemble like the Jewish storefronts being like the glass shattering of the windows. I believe it's supposed to be that exact moment. So to have such a joyous, happy moment of glass break, then right beside it compared with this like horrible moment of like a window smashing confetti, like I was stunned when that happened, and I thought it was so beautiful. And then I believe at the end of that scene, like the MC just kind of like picks up the glass and like sprinkles it in his hands to let it show like everything has shattered now. All of us getting along, all of us being together, that's gone. This is all over. And then it's like, okay, intermission. And I just like felt this like heaviness like in my chest of like, really like impacted me. And it was a very simple moment of breaking a glass confetti moment, but I loved it and thought it was like super, super effective to the storyline.
I am not Jewish, obviously, so but I am somewhat familiar with the tradition of the breaking of the glass at a wedding, and to me, like as someone kind of on the outside of that, when like that also like emotionally impacted me, because this wedding that was supposed to happen is no longer happening, and you see this glass break, but it's representing this like brick being thrown, this like breaking of this like targeting of a Jewish person, of a Jewish store, this thing that is usually so happy representing this thing that is horrifying and terrible, like was very, very impactful, like just from the outside. I think that's a beautiful staging.
Also, like not to say, but to also add meaning to that, we did see this on the second night of Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. So it's kind of interesting to have even that be like a happy celebration and see this show. And then also, again, I spoke about the like I wish you muzzle moment, which actually happens when we left the theater. Like an usher said that to us on the way out, and like I teared up. It like made me emotional to hear that. So I think I think this production, like even though something like that is so minimal, it's very very effective. And yeah, there's like little things that happen, I think, all the way through this production that it might seem like nothing to somebody, but there might be somebody in the theater that is impacting. And I think that is the goal of, I would assume that was like Rebecca Frecknell's goal of like, at least one person could feel something from this. And I think they do. So like, again,
it's very heavy-handed, but like it works. Like
yes, 100%. Like this might not work in like a different setting, but for me, like that really, I was like, oh, I understand what we're doing here. And to hear that, like, again, you who might not know like that much about a tradition also felt impact from that, like it's working. Whatever they're doing is working. So, and I can say the same thing as I said earlier about the end of everybody like in a circle, in a line, like it's working. So I couldn't imagine seeing a different production of Cabaret because I just don't know that the impact, well, I guess the way that you described the ending of the other one is like really jarring. But I just don't know if there's that like same impact like all the way through. And again, like that's kind of where everything turns and the audience kind of reacts in a way of like, should we be happy about this? Should we be cheering now? Like, I've read different reviews of like, at this moment when the show cuts to intermission, like nobody was clapping. You could hear a pin drop. Whereas like, I think it changes every night based on what kind of audience you have. So it's just as you said, like this, no matter what version you get, like the story is still the story. So it's always going to be Cabaret. It's always going to be interesting no matter what.
I will also defend everyone who gasps at the end of Act 1 when Ernst is revealed to be a Nazi, because I do think that is like a testament to the strength of the show up to that point, that even if you do know, not everyone's going to know, but even if you do know that you are so immersed in a production, to be caught by surprise by a moment and to feel the emotional impact, like you, just like Cliff, just like the other characters, have been befriended by this character. You've been charmed by this character of Ernst for the past, hour and a half. And then you also are betrayed, I hope, by that reveal. Like, if we're not betrayed, you also are betrayed and hurt by that reveal of his allegiances in that moment.
Also, again, to your point, to defend these people, it's not that often that you see one of those armbands out in public, so I think some people just literally react
Prince Harry
to
only,
that. Sometimes I think people just react to seeing the symbol in general.
To see.
Yes, so I think like it's an emotional gasp. For some people, it's truly a reveal gasp. It's like a lot going on at the same time there. Yeah. It's true, because that man, like, again, as I said, like, he's very charming in this
very
musical.
Handsome. I listened to him on the drama podcast, and he
didn't get booed at the end. Sometimes the villains get booed at the end, but this is a too serious show to boo.
It's different
to boo someone like that.
Usually when villains are booed at the end, it's usually in a more camp way, is what I'll say. Like it's silly. It's been in a fun show for the most part.
Again, we've said this a few times now, but at the end of this, you're kind of like, what are we supposed to do right now? Like, I know that people are bowing, but like, what are we supposed to do? Because not a single cast member is cracking a smile. Like, everyone is so deadpan that
everyone's in these like gray suits.
What's supposed to happen?
Just kind of very so opposite from the beginning of like this vibrancy and over the topness. It's so pared down and quiet at the end, and they're really like having the audience like sit with what has happened, because you can fill in the rest of the blanks of what's going to happen. Herr Schultz has to move, and we don't know what's going to happen to him necessarily, but we know generally what's going to happen. And just we can fill in what happens 1930 on, let's say, from what happens here. So you're kind of sitting in that knowledge that the characters don't necessarily have at that point.
It's also interesting to watch. Again, we've talked about this previously, but you and I were both watching Marty's vlogs, and like,
I love his vlogs. They're great. He's so funny.
The cast has to go through that big like transformation like every day. So it's interesting to watch how like lively everybody is backstage, when I'm like, but we're telling this like super serious story, and you guys are like having a great time backstage. I don't know. It's also like, I'm so curious to know at what point, like, you start to remove the glitter. At what point do you start to, like, remove all of the stuff? Because some of these characters, like, some of the makeup is, like, very extensive at the beginning. And then it's like, you know, I think we joked about this when we were leaving, but by the time they get ready for the stage door, they don't even need to take their makeup off. They are ready from the end of the show. So everyone is whipping out so quickly because their makeup is off.
Barefaced. Yeah, if you watch, Marty did like a makeup tutorial for both his MC makeup and also his, I don't know what character he plays. His Victor makeup. And, you know, for the MC, I think he has to do a lot of eyebrow work.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 layers of glue.
Because the glitter that goes on top has to come off so that, like, they don't have to, like, redo everything between every makeup look. Spends like half an hour on it and then gone.
To that too, for Marty specifically, I don't know what color Adam's hair is right now, but Marty's is brunette. So when Marty goes on for the MC, they kind of like white out the top half to where like the wig cap goes, because when the MC becomes blonde at the end, it needs to match that like iciness. I feel like when we saw it, Adam was like ice blonde at the time, so it wasn't like a big deal.
I do agree.
But anybody that has to play the MC, they do have to like white out the top of their hair from the very beginning, so that by the time they get to that like wig moment, it matches, because it's so in a powerful wig moment. Like, it's such a big moment that they can't risk that when they take off their makeup all the way through the show. I believe the person that plays Lulu is the other MC understudy. I also don't know if this is a track that the person plays like 8 times. I can't imagine Adam's going on 8 times a week.
I think there's one time per week that I know Eddie after the Tonys went to a 7-a-week schedule. I don't know what Adam. I wonder if it's like set or if it's just random. Yeah, the other MC is David Marino.
Yes, and I'm not sure about Sally, because that's a pretty vocally heavy role. Yeah, so I don't know if that's an 8 times a week, but I know she's kind of been off and on a lot because, you know, Moana 2 came out in the middle of her contract, so she's had press obligations. But yeah. Yeah, they're really great. I think that's all I have on Cabaret. Do you have anything more on Cabaret?
I do think that's all I have for Cabaret today. Yeah. No, I think this is a good production of this show. I would be interested in seeing other productions. I do think like it is a strong show, having been written 60 years ago to still, you know, still hits.
When John Kander went to that performance,
oh my God! When John Kander went,
Adam Lambert at what is he, 96 years old?
He is so old.
Like I think it's probably so exciting to see your work be done so many times over so many years and still have the life that it's having. So, yeah.
To write something so enduring and then to live to watch it endure, if you will, is pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's very good. Okay, should we rate it?
Yeah, I guess. I'm gonna rate it 8 out of 10. Little like fur coats that Sally Bowles wears.
I was just gonna choose a fur coat.
Well, you gotta go first.
I'm also gonna give it an 8 out of 10. For all reasons stated, I think this is a really, as you said, good production. I would recommend this. I think even if you are a Cabaret superfan, you will find something to enjoy in this. My metric will be the little party hat, which I don't think is used enough, to be honest. For it being so much a part of the promotional materials, not used enough. We should have all left with a party hat.
So true. But
actually, the end is not the moment.
And it's like, here's a party hat.
At the beginning.
I think if they bring you on stage at the top of Act 2, you get to keep
hat.
That. You keep your party hat. But beyond that, that's probably a sanitation issue for everyone to get their own party hats.
You're right. All that to say, again, as we're recording, it's still on, but the Broadway production has seen like quite a decrease in prices and I believe capacity. So maybe when this episode is released, it will have announced a closing date, or maybe we'll have new cast members attached to play the MC and Sally.
And who's been announced in the West End? Billy Porter and who?
Oh, she was just in Guys and Dolls and in Waitress.
Marisha Wallace?
Yes.
Marisha Wallace?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's,
Billy
I think,
Porter
both,
is... Oh,
both
here we
black,
go.
Both black
yes.
actors.
I didn't even think about that. If we're going to talk about an over-the-top person, I wonder how Billy Porter's going to play this.
I know.
But also,
Porter,
might give... I was going to say, if we're going to talk about vocals, Billy's got the vocals. So I think him and Adam are probably like the number one, number two of like vocalists in this role. Somebody said that like Cara Delevingne was actually so good in this.
I believe.
And they want her to come to New York. I don't know. I do think this show could live on if they keep casting it properly.
I think the character of Sally, actually this kind of plays into my obsession because we'll get to that in a minute, but I think the character of Sally is also quite malleable in that, you know, she is a performer, and so as you keep bringing performers in, like, they bring the context of who they are to her. But actually, this is a good segue to my obsession. So
with that, that's our thoughts on Cabaret, and it's now time for our obsession of the week. Okay, Steph, what's your obsession?
Okay, my obsession is this article that was in the Associated Press, and it's called How the Roxys Are Made, Behind the Iconic Role in Broadway's Mega Hit, Chicago.
Wow,
and it's
you're like really into Chicago today.
I am into Chicago. I think it's like a good match for this, but reading this article made me appreciate Chicago more, and I'm going to talk about it. Basically, it's an article that talks about why/how they keep star casting the role of Roxy in the Broadway musical Chicago. And basically so let me find it. It says it welcomes people constantly. There's never a locked door. Basically Roxy does not have that much to do in this show. So it's a role that many people can do. And it falls in line with the show itself. The choreographer, Greg Butler, prepares actors in Los Angeles. He says, we talk about celebrity and how celebrity is glorified, and yet in a way we glorify it. And so by bringing these stars in, they keep doing it. So what they do is Duncan Stewart, who is the casting director for the show, he says once a year he will go to a magazine stand and buy $400 worth of magazines and give it to all his staff. And they go with black pens and they circle people's faces and they write the character name next to it. They'll write Roxy, whatever his name is, the lawyer whose name I forget right now, Velma. They'll write the names next to it, and then they kind of come back together with that list and they go through all the people's names. They're like, no idea is bad. And they go through that list and then they kind of like, okay, what's realistic? And they start going out to people's agents and they say, ask not what you can do for Chicago, but what Chicago can do for you. They pitch it to these performers as like, this is going to be good for your career. This is a milestone moment. You get a Broadway debut, blah, 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 blah. So then they basically will give these people offers, and it's contingent on a Roxy boot camp, and they put them through a Roxy boot camp where they like learn the songs, learn the things, whatever. A lot of the times the choreography is hard for them. And so they have different like ways of adapting the choreography for the different performers. They'll say, you know, in the number Roxy, a lot of them are doing very different things from each other, you know, but they're like, when they're surrounded by 7 strong ensemble male dancers, it's fine for you to just stand in the middle if you need to. That's okay. They're like, there's very few things you need to be able to do. They'll ask them like, what's your favorite pose? What's your favorite thing to do? And they'll work that in. Like the production of Chicago is always in conversation with who this real person is. They talked about Pamela Anderson, how they made the cut of her bodysuits look like her Baywatch bathing suits as like a reference to who she is. And this article was fascinating to me, and I just think it's like, and it made me appreciate Chicago's existence, its continued existence on Broadway. To kind of like, I really was like, you know what, you can stay. You can stay.
Are you going to see it? Probably not, but it can stay.
but it made me like appreciate it. They said Melanie Griffith couldn't do the specific thing, so they changed it for her, and now it's like an alternate move that they offer to the Roxys if they're having a hard time with this other thing. Like this fascinated me. I think you know.
I do think some ideas are bad ideas though. Like
some are bad. Some are bad. For sure. For sure, they're bad. But then some of them come in and are like, you're amazing. Where have you been?
Yeah.
So I think it's just, you know, does Billy Ray Cyrus need to do 8 performances?
I was literally going to bring him up.
He does. I don't know if he does, but you know.
It is interesting because like Velma is much less like StarCast than Roxy.
Because Velma has a lot more to do. It's a much
vocally
more difficult role
too.
than
There's
Roxy.
A lot.
Vocally, dance-wise, it's just a lot more difficult role. Roxy is the StarCast, especially because with she's chasing fame, so I think it's interesting to have someone who is famous in that role, and
or someone that's chasing fame.
Someone that's chasing fame. That's why they have so many reality stars go in.
Ariana Madix,
Ariana
twice.
Madix, like so true. They're like Alyssa Milano, Melora Hardin, Melanie Griffith. They were talking about just so many different people. This article was fascinating to me.
Melissa Milano was just in it. I don't know if she's still in it, but
fairly recently, I think. So many different people have gone in and done it. Pamela Anderson. They said Pamela Anderson was like a revelation in Chicago.
I heard that. So many people were like obsessed with her.
They're like, they said some of the Roxys need a lot of work, including singing lessons. Some Roxys you leave alone, like Pamela Anderson. Like some come in and just nail it, and some are, a struggle. But I think it all plays into the show. Again, another Kander and Ebb. Another Kander and Ebb score.
It is kind of interesting, though, because I feel like that does limit, like, all of these women that are, like, coming into the theater industry, like, hoping to play Roxy. They'll never play her because
they're
you're
never
a celebrity.
They're never going to play Roxy. Well, not never.
You could maybe be an understudy, but, like, yeah.
They're not never, maybe not never, but for the most part,
it's not
Roxy is StarCast because it adds to the text. And yeah, this article is really interesting to me, and so that's my obsession of the week. They're like, she sings 2 songs, and she has to climb a ladder in her heels, and that's it. Have you ever seen this production? Have you seen this production of Chicago?
No, I've never been to the Ambassador.
No, but I saw it on tour here.
Oh, no. I've never... No.
Yeah, she climbs a ladder, and I was like, wow, everyone climbs this ladder. Good for them.
Maybe when I saw it at Mirvish, like, over 10 years ago, because I'm sure it's, like, quite similar, but I just, like, do not remember.
No, it's not that memorable to me, but,
no.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not an embarrassing costume. It's just like a little black dress. So it's very sellable to these people. Anyway, this is my obsession this week. It's a really interesting article. The Associated Press. Recommend you read it. So
interesting. Wow.
Tara, what's your obsession this week?
I mean, not as interesting as this, but I feel like I am years late to the party, but I recently listened to the How to Dance in Ohio cast recording, which I know that you have used a song previously as an obsession. I think it was Building Momentum. And then we have since seen Liam Pierce perform on stage. Mm-hmm. But my obsession this week is the song Waves and Wires. It's kind of like a full ensemble moment of like right before they get to the dance and how people are wired differently. And it's mostly sung by Liam Pierce, who's about to ask out this girl to the dance, but then he gets too nervous and he gives her book instead. I believe it's the Act 1 finale. But listening to this cast recording, I was like, why didn't this work? And I feel like the reason it didn't work is because I don't think that it was maybe meant for Broadway. I think it was maybe meant for like off-Broadway
smaller space.
Yeah, smaller space. But the music is really good. It reminds me a lot of Fun Home. I'm not super familiar with, don't ask me his name, the guy that did the music. Hang on, I will find it. But because he hasn't done that much, but it does Jacob Yandura and Rebecca Greer Malochik. But it sounds a lot like Fun Home to me. It's got a little bit of like Kimberly Akimbo in it, which is kind of surprising because that didn't like, it worked, but it didn't work, but it did win Best Musical. So I don't know. It's very like modern musical theater contemporary, which I know we're tired of, but this is sweet. This is nice.
No, I'm sure it is.
And I don't know. I do think maybe I did. I don't know if I dreamed this or if I did actually see this, but did they license it? Because this would be perfect for schools.
They probably did. I think they did.
I know, like, obviously on Broadway it had a full autistic cast, which is like really the mandate. Like, this is what the show should be. It's based on that documentary of the same name. But it is a very like sweet cast recording, and I do recommend it. But my favorite song is Waves and Wires. And yeah. That is our obsession of the week. That is our thoughts on Cabaret. And that's the end of this episode. So if you want to listen to any of our other episodes, you can do that by subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment.
And you can follow us on Instagram at Off2BOA Podcast with the number 2.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.